Let's start today with the villain of our story, Lionel Messi. So he's the best soccer player in the world, and as you can imagine, as a result of that, commands quite a healthy salary. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's about half Professor Greg Craven money. But actually, in reality, that's his weekly salary. So when he goes down holding the back of his leg, hamstring strain injured, that's a big problem for his club, because FC Barcelona ultimately loses that much money when he can't play. Now, in this situation where he sustains a number of hamstring strain injuries in any one season, that's a huge problem. Now, the hero of our story really is Professor Jan Ekstrand, the head of the European Football Medical Association, who's been telling us for a very long time this is a problem, and a problem that we've known for many, many years. And it's not trending downwards, it's in fact trending upwards in elite soccer. And the estimates is that just in elite soccer alone, it costs something in the vicinity of $500 million a year in player unavailability, just from one injury. So I want you to think from a hypothetical perspective. You work in an organisation or an industry that's losing money hand over fist due to an injured workforce. What do you think you would come up with in terms of some of the explanations? And the crazy thing that happens in elite soccer is it's just bad luck. If we're losing $500 million here at ACU, I bet you it's not just bad luck. But everyone knows that that's an issue, and so the concept of injury prevention has become very, very popular. If we think a little closer to home though, injury prevention in Australian rules football is quite easy. We're just going to tell our players never ever to run fast, never ever bend over to pick up the ball, and for God's sakes, whatever you do, don't ever kick. Now, we've taken that model of a game to the fans, and you can understand the predictable response. But this is quite popular, so much so that we're looking at big industry now telling us that we can predict injury in sport with analytics. Okay, now, when I hear that, my predictable response, because that's ultimately not true. When we deal with sports injury, we're not dealing with predicting injury. And if we look at some of our earlier work, really it's all about probability and likelihood. If we try and determine the likelihood or the probability of hamstring strain injury, either no chance or certain to happen, you'll notice here that when we look at a measure of hamstring strength compared to athlete age, we're never dealing with certainly no or certainly yes. We're very much dealing with that area of grey. So we're not dealing with prediction, we're dealing with probability. So for us, the goal is really about risk mitigation and not injury prevention. But the key takeaway from some of our earlier work is that there are many factors that are associated with injury risk. And ultimately, all those factors interact, and sometimes in fashions that we mightn't expect or mightn't anticipate. And the difficulty with that is that they're complex interactions. And when things are often complex and difficult, we tend to look away from those because they're hard to deal with statistically and logistically. So really the program of our next thrust of work, which is due to start now in November of this year, is to try and identify better what are the factors that are associated with this. So this has been the traditional reductionist approach, and we're guilty of that ourselves. We've looked at a number of these factors, looking at measures of strength in the field, using a device we've commercialised as part of my PhD research. We've looked at the structure of the muscle using two-dimensional ultrasound, and we've used things like GPS technology to measure exposure to running demands in game. Now, we've looked at all of those independently. Ultimately, what we need to start developing is better ways to understand the complex interrelationship of all of those variables. So moving forward, our plan is to try to work out that relationship leading to here better. So ultimately, it'll be the first study in the world that will be both multi-club, and you can understand sporting clubs are very protective of their data, and also multi-year, with that first year allowing us to develop prediction modelling that will enable us to assess the probabilities of hamstring strain injury, but then, in something that no one's ever done before, is to actually test the strength and accuracy of those models. The benefit of this approach is that this is actually ultimately a living organism, and we can use techniques for machine learning to feed new and better information into those models to strengthen them over time. And ultimately, we're not really that worried with the uber rich and uber successful, but ultimately we're concerned with any injury in sport that this principle can be applied to, or indeed any context in the health setting where there might be a complex interrelationship of variables. Thank you.